Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup. Stage 3, Week 3 results. Okay. This week has been an interesting one. I don't think we can deny that one. We have seen a shift in meta developing this stage. There will be an individual video on that at some point. Things are starting to change. And some teams are not adapting well to it. They are not adapting well at all. But we will go through the fixtures and we will discuss what's happened. So, on Friday we started off with the San Francisco Shurk versus the Boston Uprising. The week actually started off pretty as expected. This was a 4-0 for the Shurk. Boston, bad run recently. But again, I don't think anyone expected Boston to beat the Shurk. So, the Shurk keep marching on. Next up was the Paris Eternal taking on the Houston Outlaws. Houston Outlaws doing really well of recent, and they continue this against Paris. It's a game they must win if they want to try and get back to where perhaps getting into those play-in spots. And with their current form, they can certainly do so. They beat the Paris Eternal 3-1. This is a bad loss for Paris. It's actually a bad week in total for Paris, so work to do for the French. Moving on, we have the Hangzhou Spark taking on the Dallas Fuel. Now, I said in the preview video of this week that it would be a big week for the Hangzhou Spark, and they come out on top over the Dallas Fuel 3-0. Dallas Fuel are on a bad run of form, really bad run of form, and it's costing them dearly. They are losing ground on the chasing pack. What I mean by the chasing pack is the pack that's chasing that 6th place. They're currently chasing the Hangzhou Spark, so they've lost ground dearly, the Dallas Fuel, and they're starting to get dragged into the dogfight that is the last few play-in spots. Bad times for Fuel. Moving on, we had our first, it was a mini shock of the week, I think. Shanghai Dragons taking on the Los Angeles Valiant. Los Angeles Valiant are looking really rejuvenated in Stage 3, and they managed to take down the Shanghai Dragons 3-1. Again, another team in that chasing pack of people that are after the last automatic playoff places, losing ground on the likes of London Spitfire, the Gladiators and Hangzhou Spark. Gaps are starting to emerge in the league now, especially after some of the results this week. So moving on to Saturday, and we had the London Spitfire taking on the New York Excelsior. Now, this kind of depended on what London turned up, because obviously we had this in week 1 and it was a complete whitewash for the Excelsior. This time was very different. The London we saw this week, and this goes for the game later on as well, is a completely different London. This is a London we have not seen before. This is a triple DPS London. A triple DPS London. They're running a lot of Wrecking Ball, Gesture solo tanking on Orisa. We've seen Birdwing back on Widow, which is something I think we all want to see. We've also seen going off on a tangent, we've seen Carpe on Widow as well, which is really good. London are doing stuff and experimenting, and they're doing it perhaps at the right time, because the meta is shifting now. It does go to the New York Excelsior this game, but it's 3-2. The sort of game that you'd expect London to give Excelsior. In my opinion, London can always take Excelsior very close, if not beat the Excelsior. And this is the sort of game I expected in week 1. We just didn't get it. They got completely shut down by SSB, Sabiobi Sombra. So, much better from London. Much better. They do lose, but I kind of expected them to lose the game. But as long as they put on a good showing, that's what we need to see from London Spitfire. And it was a really good game to watch. So if you want to go back and watch the VOD, I suggest you do so. Moving on, we have the San Francisco Shock taking on the Florida Mayhem. No surprises here that the Shock get the 4-0 over the Mayhem. Mayhem still looking like the Florida Mayhem. Next up, we have another mini shock. It's the Los Angeles Gladiators taking on the Shanghai Dragons. Shanghai off the back of the bad loss to the Valiant, but they bounced back and beat the Gladiators. The Gladiators had been on a good run of form. They're right up there. I think they're in 4th, the Gladiators. But this means they lose ground on the Shock, who are in 3rd. Gladiators could have feasibly caught Shock if they could get some. If the Shock drop a game here and there. Remember, they lost to the Houston Outlaws. So this is a bad loss for the Gladiators, but again, it's not a terrible loss. You don't want to be losing to the lower teams, and Shanghai is certainly not a lower team right now. Next up, we have the Chengdu Hunters taking on the Vancouver Titans. No surprises here that the Titans get the win over the Chengdu Hunters, although the Hunters do take a map, which is good from the Hunters' point of view. They've had a better stage than the last stage, I think, Hunters, but they're not quite there, and people are catching up now with what Hunters have been running all season long, this heavy DPS stuff. There are a lot more people running it now. So the Vancouver Titans win this one 3-1. Moving on, we have the London Spitfire in action again, against the Washington Justice. Now this is a must-win for London, because of their stage. It is the most difficult stage of their season, and they need to win games like this, and it was very hairy. It was really close. 2-1 to London. London running some weird stuff. Not gonna lie, it's some weird stuff, looks we haven't seen from London before. They got a big wake-up call against Excelsior in week 1, and I think they're starting to move with the times. It's a win nonetheless for London, and a win they did need, but really it should have been more like a 3-1, if not a 4-0, against the likes of Washington Justice, so work to do for London, I think. Moving on, we have the Atlanta Reign taking on the Philadelphia Fusion. This was kind of a must-win for both teams, and it was very close, but it goes 3-2 to the Philadelphia Fusion. Fusion are kind of steadying the ship right now. They are in about 8th place, which is decent. They are outside of the automatic playoffs, but they are solidly within those play-ins, so I would expect Philadelphia Fusion to finish above 12th place. It just depends whether they can make a late run for the automatics. We will wait to see for that. Atlanta Reign, they are on the outside looking in, I believe, so they need to start picking up some wins, Atlanta Reign. They really do. And remember, we've got the Atlanta weekend coming up not too far away. Moving on, we have the Toronto Defiant taking on the Guangzhou Charge. Toronto are in a seriously bad spot. At the start of the season, they looked really good. But with some roster changes, they are looking bad right now. And I mean bad. They're looking like perhaps the third worst team in the league. It's not good for Toronto right now, and they are really slipping down the standings. They are occupying that last place, that 12th place in the play-ins, but they are rapidly being caught by the teams around them. So, and that includes Guangzhou, and this was a 4-0 for Guangzhou as well. So, really good win for the Guangzhou Charge. They looked really good synergy-wise. But was that the Guangzhou Charge being really good, or was that the Toronto Defiant being really bad? It remains to be seen. But, big win for Guangzhou, bad loss for Toronto. Next up, we have the Hangzhou Spark in action again against the Seoul Dynasty. I said it was a big week for the Hangzhou Spark. They got the 3-0 against Dallas, but they needed to beat the Seoul Dynasty, because the Seoul Dynasty were the team that were chasing them, and the team with a really good map differential. Could the Hangzhou Spark do the deed? Yes, they could. It was a tight one, and it was one of the most bizarre matches of Overwatch I've ever seen. Hangzhou Spark dominated the first map. They then dominated the second map, and at halftime Seoul had had enough, and they changed their entire team. Because remember, Seoul is a 12-man roster. First time in the Overwatch League's history where a team has been entirely changed. They substituted out 6 players and subbed in 6 players. Crazy. Seoul then went 2 maps unbeaten, but Hangzhou Spark are very good when it goes to a map 5. They win it 3-2. Hangzhou Spark, brilliant week for them. Did exactly what they needed to do, and they are in a really good position, especially when we talk about the result later on. Moving on, we have the Chengdu Hunters taking on the Dallas Fuel. Now, I said the Dallas Fuel were in a bad spot. This was a game they needed to win. They didn't. They got absolutely swept aside by the Chengdu Hunters 4-0. Oh dear, Dallas. It was looking so good for the first 2 stages, and now we are looking like Dallas are slipping down the league, and they're slipping down the league quite rapidly. They're on a 10-10 record right now. Their map differential has completely gone out the window, and they are being caught by the pack below them. So Dallas need to have an upturn in fortune right now. They really do. Moving on, we have the Boston Uprising taking on the Paris Eternal. I said it was a bad week for Paris. Boston have been on a bad run recently. And they needed some sort of boost, in my opinion, to get out of that rut of losing games. Paris Eternal, they take a 2-0 lead, but we know the Boston Uprising, and the Boston Uprising are the kings of reverse sweeps. They have, I think, got the most reverse sweeps within a season this year. They reverse sweep the Paris Eternal and win it 3-2. Big win for Boston. Big win for Boston. They needed that dearly to get out of the rut they were in. Paris Eternal, it's been a bad week. It's been a bad week for the team from France. They need to win these games. It was a week where they could have gone 2-0 and instead have gone 0-2. And these sorts of weeks will cost you in the long run. Badly. So Paris needs to start picking up some wins. Boston Uprising, hopefully they can push on from here and get some more wins on the board. Moving on, we had the Houston Outlaws taking on the Florida Mayhem. You know, I said Houston have been on a really good run of form recently. Yeah. Well, even I expected Houston Outlaws to sweep the Florida Mayhem. That didn't happen. Florida Mayhem get their second win of the season against the Houston Outlaws, 3-1. I can't believe I'm saying that. The Houston Outlaws beat the San Francisco Shock a couple of weeks ago. And now we're saying they've just lost to the worst team in the league. I don't even know what this week has been, to be quite honest. It's been really bizarre. This week has been really bizarre. It's been one of the weirdest weeks I've ever had in Overwatch League history, I think, because it's just been so unpredictable. So unpredictable. Well done to the Florida Mayhem for finally getting that streak over and done with. I don't expect Florida to really push on after this. I think it's just a freak result. But Houston, that's a bad loss. That's a really bad loss. I mean, I can't describe how bad that loss is. It's just so bad. Outlaws, you can't drop that game, especially on the run you've been on. It's a bad loss, and one you really couldn't afford. Now you're trying to make a really late run for those play-ins. So this loss could really cost the Houston Outlaws later down the line. But that wasn't going to be the biggest shock of the day. Last game of the week was the Los Angeles Valiant taking on the Vancouver Titans. Now, there is a meta shift going on, and it leans much more towards Sombra and less towards traditional goats with a D.Va. D.Va is actually not being played nowhere near as much at the moment, although we are seeing a good amount of D.Va, not dominant amount of D.Va like we used to. And this is because Sombra has become quite dominant in the meta. We're seeing a lot of Sombra goats. And this is not Vancouver's strong point. Somin Su on Sombra does not look as competent as some of the other Sombras in the league, including Shax of the Valiant. And it started off okay for the Titans. They won the first map, but it wasn't convincing. Nowhere near convincing. But then things started to change. And Valiant really stepped things up. They were dominant on Paris. They were fairly dominant on Eichenwald. And they were also fairly dominant on Dorado. We see the Vancouver Titans lose for the first time in the regular season. They lose 3-1 to the Los Angeles Valiant. Oh boy. What a week. Valiant went 0-7 in the first stage, and now they've just handed the Titans their first loss of the regular season. What a comeback arc that is. Well done to the Valiant. They are looking much improved. And they are one of those teams that is making a late run in for those playoffs. Or the play-ins, I should say. And they're a team that could quite easily win them, the way they're playing at the moment. It's getting really interesting. A slight change in the meta, and it's turning things on its head. It's making NYXL much more dominant than they were. It's putting Vancouver Titans on the rocks slightly. The only team that we've seen, well, even the San Francisco Shock slipped up against Houston Outlaws. Although I think that was more the Shock taking Outlaws for granted, rather than them being bad at the meta. So, It's really interesting. It's a really interesting time in the Overwatch League. And remember, we haven't seen new Diva yet. And we haven't seen new McCree. So, Stage 4 could shake things up even more. Moving on to our standings though. Of course, the Vancouver Titans are still on top in the overall standings. But we'll start with the stage standings. And for one of the first times this season, New York Excelsior topped the stage standings, with the Vancouver Titans in second, on a 5-1 record. But the interesting thing is, now that Vancouver Titans have lost, the bye for the stage playoffs, which will be the winner of the Pacific Division, is wide open, because you've got 3 teams on 1 loss. That are the Titans, the Shock, and the Hangzhou Spark. So we could see any one of them win that division and get the bye in the stage playoffs. So there's all to play for those 3 teams. Valiant are in 5th on a 4-1 record. A massive, massive bounce back from the Valiant this stage. In 6th we have the Shanghai Dragons. In 7th we have the Seoul Dynasty. And in 8th we have the Los Angeles Gladiators. In 9th we have the Houston Outlaws. And in 10th we have the London Spitfire. The Houston Outlaws and the London Spitfire are on the same record as Seoul Dynasty and the Gladiators. They're just poorer map differentials. So there's all to play for there as well. In 11th we have the Paris Eternal. It's looking unlikely for Paris at this point, I think. We're looking at the other teams. And then we have the Guangzhou Charge, the Philadelphia Fusion and the Chengdu Hunters in 12th, 13th, 14th. Florida Mayhem in 15th, one of their highest positionings all season. 2 teams that are out of it, Dallas Fuel and the Boston Uprising, a 1-5 record will not get you into those stage playoffs. Toronto Defiant and Washington Justice are in it just because they haven't played as many games, but I don't expect them to make it. And of course, the bottom team, a 0-5 record, Atlanta Reign. It's unfortunate. It's been a difficult stage for Atlanta in some respects, but they are not going to make it to the stage playoffs this stage. Moving on to the overall standings, Vancouver, as I said, are still top, but they do have that 1 loss in that column now. There are no teams unbeaten this season. Second, the New York Excelsior, and there is an opportunity now for New York Excelsior to close the gap on the Titans. They are only 1 loss behind them. They have played 2 less games than the Titans, and remember that the New York Excelsior will have to play the Titans next stage. It's opening up. The Titans are going into a meta where they're not so confident, and their most difficult stage will be stage 4. In stage 4 they have to play the London Spitfire, they have to play the Excelsior, they have to play the Shock. It's going to get really interesting. 4th we have the Los Angeles Gladiators, just behind the Shock in 3rd. There is a gap opening up between the Gladiators and the Shock though. We're seeing that quite clear top 3 develop. But 4th, 5th and 6th, which is the Gladiators, the Spitfire and the Hangzhou Spark, are all on the same record. There is now a gap opening up though at the end of those automatic playoffs, with Shanghai in 7th. They haven't played as many games as the Hangzhou Spark, but they are 1 loss behind them. So they're starting to open up slightly. Philadelphia Fusion are on the same record as the Shanghai Dragons in 8th. Seoul Dynasty have fallen to 9th after their loss to the Hangzhou Spark. Dallas Fuel all the way down in 10th now with a 10-10 record and being caught by the 11th place Chengdu Hunters. 12th, Toronto Defiant occupying the last play-in place. And then you've got the chasing pack. You've got Paris Eternal in 13th, Boston Uprising in 14th on an 8-12 record. You've got the Guangzhou Charge in 15th on a 7-11 record. Atlanta Reign and the Los Angeles Valiant on a 7-12 record, and the Houston Outlaws on a 6-13 record. All those teams can catch those play-in places. And some of them, like the Valiant, look like they can. Especially the Valiant. The Valiant's form right now, I would not be surprised to see them in the play-ins, especially with the form of Paris and Toronto right now, not looking so good. And then you have the bottom 2 teams, the Washington Justice in 19th and the Florida Mayhem in 20th. Both on the same record, 2-16, both on the same differential, -35. Those teams, it's highly unlikely they're going to make the play-ins. If Florida somehow do it now, I'll be gobsmacked. But this one's been a little bit longer than I expected, this roundup, because of the crazy week that we've had in the Overwatch League. There's been DPS comps, there's been upsets left, right and centre. There's been all sorts going on, and it's going to get more interesting as the stage pans out towards the end of the stage now. Going into the playoffs should be really interesting if Vancouver don't get things sorted. And then you go into stage 4 where you could see something completely different with Hugh McCree. So it's getting super duper weird. And remember, the Titans lost to Valiant this week. They've got to play Gladiators next week. Gladiators are a tougher opponent than Valiant on paper, so who knows what might happen next week. But I am going to leave it here. There will be a video on the meta because it is shifting slowly but surely. And I think it's more due to some of the lower teams than some of the higher teams at the right now. But that's for another video because this is now 20 minutes long, this roundup, and I don't want it to be any longer. So, for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next video. See you then!